For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to StratNews Global. You are on the first broadcast of the year on our weekly feature, The Talking Point. I am standing in for our regular anchor, Amitabh Reddy. I am Nitin Gokhale. Our guest this evening for the first Talking Point episode of 2024 is a special guest from London, Rahul Roy-Chaudhury, old friend and senior fellow for South Asia at the IISS, or the International Institute of Strategic Studies, based out of London. He's someone who watches South Asia's relations with the UK and the world at large very closely. And therefore, very happy to have you on this program, Rahul. Thank you for giving us your time, and I'm sure you'll give us your insights too.
Well, thank you, Nitin. It's great to be back with you.
Thank you. So, the topic today, of course, is primarily Indian Defence Minister or Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh's upcoming visit to the UK. I'm told an Indian Defence Minister is visiting UK after a gap of almost 22 years. So why do you think the visit is coming as it is at this moment in time, and what is the significance?
Well, it is significant that after 22 years, RM is visiting, Raksha Mantri is visiting the UK. The last visit of cabinet-level Defence Minister from India took place in January 2002, when George Fernandes visited the UK on his way back from the US. And remember, that was the time of the India-Pakistan confrontation.
Yes.
So for 22 years, there's been no cabinet-level ministerial visit for defence to the UK. Right. And I think it's something that both countries felt would be the right time now to have such a visit. And the reason for this is that so much has changed over the last 2 decades.
Yes.
For the UK, it's gone out of Europe. It's got a policy towards the Indo-Pacific now, a tilt to the Indo-Pacific. For India, we've had a stable government for the last decade. We're looking at a different sort of India in terms of its regional influence and global influence as well. So for both countries, it was important to get the defense relationship center stage. There has been an uptick in relations politically between the two countries, but defense was really something that was missing. Mm-hmm. So this visit is significant because it focuses on the defense relationship between the two countries.
And this has been in the works for some time. I mean, there have been lots of hopes and then near misses where the defense ministers on either side couldn't visit for some reason or the other.
Absolutely. In fact, a year and a half ago, Rajnath Singh ji was expected to come to the UK. The visit was planned, but it was called off by the Indian side. It was broadly put across for protocol reasons, but I think there was some dissatisfaction on the Indian side in terms of dealing with the then British counterpart on defence, Ben Wallace, who has since moved out, right. And there's a new defence secretary in the UK, right. Grant Sharps. And I think that change also made it possible for the Raksha Mantri to visit the UK at this particular juncture.
So what are the change dynamics you think, and what is hoped to be achieved in this visit? It's a 3-day long visit, if I'm not mistaken. So what are the broad contours that you are aware of?
Well, essentially, it will be a visit that will take place from the 8th to the 10th, 11th of January. And the focus will be, I think, threefold. Firstly, to build upon what has already taken place. And I think we've seen in November the Defence Consultative Group meeting between the two secretaries, the permanent secretary in the UK in defence and the defence secretary in India meeting. Before that, a month before, we had for the first time a 2+2 foreign and defence dialogue at the level of joint secretaries in the UK, directors, Director General in the UK and joint secretaries in India. So there clearly a sense was that there is a momentum that has taken place, and how do we then build on the official level talks that cover a large number of issues. So I think the first part would be building concretely on the talks that have already taken place. The second would be a focus which is more challenging, but that is the focus that the Raksha Mantri will have on defense technology and industrial participation with the UK.
Right.
And this is something that, as you know better than most, Nitin, is key for India's defense focus in the next decade and beyond.
Sure.
Made in India, Atmanirbhar Bharat. But this will be challenging because it is not the UK government that will lead on these issues. It is UK defense companies.
Sure.
And their perspective is not always the same as the UK government's, which is very keen to deal with India. So I think there will clearly be some focus on the defense technology piece and the partnerships. And there are some ongoing projects that could be useful, and we could talk about them later. Yes. And the last part, I think, would be on the maritime domain aspect, maritime domain awareness, maritime security. India and the UK have a strong interest in the Western Indian Ocean, both role and influence. And here are opportunities, real opportunities, to strengthen, deepen maritime domain awareness links, maritime security links. And I think this would be the third large package that could come in the visit.
Interesting you speak about maritime domain because if we recall in India, one of the strongest partnerships between India and the UK have been on the naval front. The aircraft carrier, India's first aircraft carrier came from the UK for the Indian Navy. And of course the technology and the for the Indian Air Force, even today, the trainers, Hawk trainers are from the UK. And yet, this partnership, the defense partnership, had sort of fallen behind in terms of importance and in terms of, I would say, traction. If you look at what India has achieved with other countries, other democracies like the United States or even France, for instance. So I think this is a revived interest in this. So in that context, in the overall relationship between India and the UK, where do you situate the defense partnership?
So that's a great question. I mean, in May 2021, Prime Minister Modi and then Prime Minister Boris Johnson sort of brought out a 10-year roadmap called the India-UK Roadmap 2030 that focused on 5 pillars of the roadmap. One of the pillars was defense and security. But I think that this pillar has not till recently been given the priority it should have been given. And the focus has been largely and still continues to a large extent to be on the trade aspect. So the sort of finalization of a free trade agreement between India and the UK has really taken center stage in the bilateral relationship to the detriment of, I believe, all other aspects, including defense. Raksha Mantri's visit to the UK is, I think, an attempt to correct this and to provide more focus on the defense and security pillar of the roadmap. So in terms of priority, it is not the top priority for the bilateral relationship, but it would only have taken place if the political relationship between the two countries had improved. And that is why we are seeing the visit after 22 years, because there are still divergences and differences between India and the UK, including on a key issue that is most important to the UK, which is the Russia-Ukraine war. But notwithstanding that, I think, as I said earlier, there is an uptick in the relationship, and defense is actually a result of this uptick, and the visit is a result of this uptick of political relations.
Oh, indeed. You spoke about Russia-Ukraine war and the divergence of views, but in India, as I see it in the defense establishment or in the deep establishment, there is also this constant nagging feeling that the UK Pakistan equation always casts a shadow on the India-UK relationship. And also because UK refuses to act decisively, as the Indians believe, against Khalistani extremists, even against Islamic terrorism or some of the impetus for Islamic terrorism which comes from there. But I believe that must have changed or is changing, and therefore this visit is taking place at the cabinet level, like you mentioned. But coming specifically to defense industry partnership that you spoke about earlier, and then we can get into the details as we discussed. What are the areas of defense partnership or defense industrial partnership that you would think India and the UK can work together and has a potential for a larger offtake from there?
So I think just to respond to the first part, I think, there are still differences between India and the UK on the Khalistani issue, on the Pakistan issue, on other regional issues in that sense. But I think the idea, and I think the sort of what we're seeing now is a sort of more sort of flexibility in terms of discussing these issues. The UK has tried to de-hyphenate between India and Pakistan. It's not always seen that way in India in that sense. But in terms of priority, I mean, looking at it from London, I mean, India, is far a greater priority for the UK than Pakistan, especially when we look at it still towards the Indo-Pacific.
Sure.
But this still has some convincing to be done on the Indian side. So there's no question on that. On the Khalistani issue, it is a serious concern. There have been, sort of Khalistani extremists, there have been violence outside the Indian High Commission. And this is something where the Indian security establishment, feels very strongly. These issues continue. But I think the sense is that despite these issues, both sides want to improve the bilateral relationship. And I think we're seeing that. So
there's more honest conversation.
I think there is greater conversation, and I hope there's honest conversation between the two countries. But there's clearly a sense of dealing with these issues rather than denying these issues.
Right.
And to me, that to me is a big step
Yes,
forward. I mean, instead of denying it, where both countries are dealing with it. So that's important. In terms of defense areas of cooperation, I think there are three really that are important. And the first is a unique project on the development of aero engines between DRDO and Rolls-Royce. It's gone through the first stage, expected to move to the second stage.
Sure.
And this is something, again, that is actually to the spirit and the core of India's Atmanirbhar policy, because it is co-creating, co-developing with IP ultimately residing in India, etc. So that's a big sort of piece. Another one is on naval electric propulsion,
Right.
Which is being carried out by GE Naval and Rolls-Royce. There's been a joint working group recently set up. Meetings have taken place between the government and GE, Rolls-Royce and others. That again is a potential project for both countries. And the third, I think, really in terms of surface-to-air missiles, with MBDA, UK is involved. So there are sort of three sort of areas where there could be progress. Clearly, there is competition with on all these issues.
Right.
But the bottom line would be, and I think one would like to see this in the Raksha Mantri's visit,
Right.
is some progress on a political sort of sphere in terms of some of these projects, at least, because delivery is key, and we haven't seen that as yet between India and the UK in terms of defense technology partnerships.
So one takeaway for me from what we have discussed so far is that the past is no longer casting that overwhelming shadow on the current relationship. I think people are willing to, I won't say forget the past, but at least put it aside and start dealing and having conversations on the difficult parts, and then look for new opportunities, which is what I can see if I can sort of term the relationship, especially in the defense domain, in those terms.
I agree fully. I mean, there are legacy issues also that remain on defense supplies, etc.
Exactly.
But the view is from both countries, India and the UK, to move forward, to see what can be done. And you mentioned France and other countries. I mean, it's very clear that the UK is far behind these countries in the defense sphere.
Yes.
Partly because of Brexit, the UK had to sort of focus internally for several years on it. But post-Brexit, I think the UK government, the Rishi Sunak's government, is very clear that India is a top priority. Defense is a key aspect, but there's a lot of difference between France and the UK.
No, of course. A lot of heavy lifting will have to be done. And does it help that Rishi Sunak is of Indian origin, if not Indian?
So, I think Rishi Sunak came to India as, for the G20 summit, where he had a very good meeting with Prime Minister Modi. My personal view is that in the end, it is all about delivery.
Sure.
So, whichever Prime Minister can deliver for both countries in that sense. So, Rishi Sunak, if he can deliver a trade deal for example, with India, then that's important.
Sure.
But I would say the delivery aspect is far more important than his ethnicity.
Yeah, absolutely. Two final points on this, or questions, if you may. One is there a scope for cybersecurity cooperation and intelligence cooperation between two countries?
So on cybersecurity, there has been a very good dialogue between the two governments for very many years, run by the foreign ministries of both countries. That seems to have sort of made good sort of headway. There seem to be some developments there which are taking place. So that is important. But I think in a way, on intelligence cooperation, I'm not aware of the sort of the dynamics between the two. But there are clearly, as you're aware, that the UK is invited for a meeting of the intelligence chiefs that takes place in India, has been taking place for the last few years. So I think that's a positive point in that sense. But I'm not sure of the details.
Okay. And one final point now about the maritime domain. Again, I come back to it because UK has been a maritime faring nation, and very strong traditions of maritime explorations or expeditions. And now they're turning to Indo-Pacific, which is now the new center of gravity or interest in terms of what India and the other Quad countries are doing in the Indo-Pacific. And Germany, UK, everybody's turning towards the Indo-Pacific. So in those terms, what are the tangibles that the UK is looking for, if you are aware, and if that would be discussed in this visit of the Raksha Mantri?
So I'm not sure of whether it will be discussed during the visit itself, but I think one area of interest is really what India and the UK can do in relation to third countries.
Right.
So, for example, we've seen the recent attacks of the Somalia coast. We've seen drone attacks on shipping, etc. Now, the Western Indian Ocean really is an area where I believe there's tremendous scope and opportunity for both countries to work.
Right.
I mean, Oman, if you look at Oman, the Duqm port where both India and the UK have access. Kenya, again, where there are, there's UK presence. And of course, for India and the Navy, an important part of the West Indian Ocean.
Right.
So to me, the focus really should be on the Western Indian Ocean in terms of what both India and the UK can do in a joint manner. Because if we look further sort of, up the coast, it is really the US presence there. If we look south, it is the French.
Yes.
But it's the Western Indian Ocean, Eastern Africa, India's own interest and policy towards Africa. So to me, on the maritime domain, the unique aspect really is the possibility of trilateral cooperation between and among India, UK, Oman, or Kenya.
That's a great thought on which to end our conversation, Rahul. Thank you very much for these great insights, because India and the UK have promised to deliver quite a bit, but have consistently underperformed in that respect over the past 2 decades. But like you said, times have moved on. The situation has changed. Both countries are looking to gain as much as possible from each other. And therefore, I think the Raksha Mantri visit will be watched very carefully. I'm sure we'll come back to you again to ask you what happened exactly, maybe a week later or so. But for the moment, thank you very much for your time and your insights.
Thank you, Nitin.
That was Rahul Roy-Chaudhury from IISS giving us his thoughts on what could be achieved during Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh's upcoming visit to the UK starting next Monday. This is Talking Point, and I'm Nitin Gokhale. Do keep watching StratNews Global.